As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 1 of season 12, and I cannot believe this, but I'm almost at 3 years with this podcast. And in this season, I'm going to be going over 150 episodes, which is insane. And I think I only started this a short time ago, like I say, 3 years, and I'm so happy with the progress that I'm making, and it's really going well. As you may have noticed, I've joined the Acast Creator Network as well, so I'm playing with the big boys now. Not that I'm anywhere near them, but I'm playing with them, so I'm happy with the progress that's going on, and I'm really thrilled with how this podcast has actually been going lately. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all your support. Now, let's get into season 12, and I'm just going to recap what I'm actually going to be looking into this season. In this episode, we're going to be covering The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart. So I will come back to that one shortly, but then we will be covering The Bonfire of Destiny, The Hunting Wives, Bates Motel, Friends from College Season 2, which will close out that show, and then Around the World in 80 Days. So I'm really enthused about this season. I love Bates Motel. I think it was brilliant when it was on TV, and I'm hoping it stands up just as much. Like I've said before, I've covered Hannibal, Clarice, and Mindhunter now, so going along that sort of serial killer path, I'm going into Bates Motel. As for some of the other things, some I've watched, some I haven't. For instance, the show I'm going to be covering today, I've never seen, but I like the people that are in it, and figured why not give it a go. It sounds like it's got a good story and a good message. It also sounds quite harrowing as well, so it'll be a very interesting watch. But as for some of the other things, The Bonfire of Destiny is a French series, which has been on Netflix, and when I watched it, I thought it was excellent. It was a period piece, but it's a really good show, and if you can get past the language barrier, it's really worth a watch. The Hunting Wives was something that came out in 2025 and really blew people away with it. There was a lot of talk about it, and I just thought it was a good show to add in since it's so recent. Friends from College we know about because we've covered season 1 already, but it's just going to be the conclusion of that show. And then Around the World in 80 Days, which is the story of Phileas Fogg, who wanted to fly around the world in 80 days in a hot air balloon, which stars Doctor Who's very own David Tennant. And he's just a national treasure, so I want to make sure that I do that show justice. But anyway, back to today. This is The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, the mini-series, episodes 1 to 3. Episode 1, Black Fire Orchid. and this show is based in Australia, and we meet the Hart family. They seem to live on a farm outside of town, and they seem to have a normal average family life. There is Clem, the father, Agnes, the wife, and Alice, the daughter. They're a young couple, and Alice seems to be around about maybe 10, maybe 12 at the max. But they seem to be living this kind of idyllic lifestyle. But as we're seeing this lifestyle play out, we start to feel some sinisterness within it. We see, for instance, that the dad Clem has a scar on his left palm, I think. Alice inquires about it, but he just tells her it was an accident and kind of shoves it off. As time goes on, we see that Clem is potentially abusing his wife. We see bruises on her skin, and Alice doesn't seem shocked by them. She seems saddened by them, but not shocked. So we can only assume that since they are in this remote area, Alice is witnessing the abuse as well. But it seems like Clem works further enough away so that the girls can actually have some time to themselves. They're not constantly being beaten or abused. However, it seems that the girls have actually been hatching a plan for quite a while now that they're going to escape. The only problem is, Agnes is now pregnant, and this makes Alice ask the question, are we ever going to actually leave? The next day, they've planned a big day out, and they're going to go into town. Even though they don't have a car, they're going to walk in. And Alice seems stoked about this. She wants to do stuff in town, she wants to go to the library, and it just seems like she's going to have a nice day with her mum before her dad gets home. The next morning, however, with the fact that the dad is coming home and the potential that that could bring, her mother is depressed. She just wants to stay in bed all day, and she is just in floods of tears. Alice can't do anything for her. Like I say, she's 10, maybe 12. She decides to walk into town on her own. Now, incredibly dangerous, especially in the world we currently live in. I'm not sure when this is set, but not a great idea. But she gets there, she walks around a bit, she heads into the library, and this is where she meets Sally. From the moment she walks in, Sally is interested in her. She wants to know why she's in town, who she is, all of these things. Alice answers her questions, and Sally asks her if she wants to borrow some books, and whether she wants to get a library card. She's just really trying to coax out of Alice why she's there. She can see bruises all over her skin, and feels that there is abuse going on in the family. She just wants Alice to trust her and make sure that she's okay. Alice, however, once she hears a phone call to someone else, decides to leave the library. She heads back home, and once she gets there, she finds her dad there, and he's home a day early. She runs into the house, she sees her mother, and her mother is terrified. She mouths to Alice to run, but before Alice can go anywhere, her father pounces on her and drags her into the bedroom, and then you just hear one of the worst sounds you can ever hear. A young girl being abused by her father. And it brings up such a fucking rage in me to hear that happening. And if I ever actually found anyone that was doing that, I'd beat the fuck out of them. Abhorrent, childish, emasculine men doing shit like that to children. The next day, the police turn up, and Sally, the librarian, is actually married to the policeman, so she's come in the car with him. He comes in and he checks around and asks Alice about what's been going on, and she basically just tells the officer it was the dog. Over the next few days, her father goes out into the fields and does his job on the land, but then a few days later, her mother is going in for her scan. She needs to make sure that the baby's okay, healthy, all that good stuff, but they leave Alice on her own. Like I say, she is 10 or 12, and she does what any curious 10 or 12-year-old does. She starts looking around the house, she starts searching places, looking here, there and everywhere, and then she thinks about something. She's been reading a book about fire gods, and she decides that maybe she could do something to get rid of her problem. She heads out into the shed, into her father's work shed, and starts messing around in there. She ends up knocking over a lantern, and it sets fire to the barn. However, just as the fire is spreading, her father and mother arrive. Alice runs back off into the house. She's taken a load of supplies from within that shed, all flammable stuff, and she runs back into the house. She hides under the bed sheets, and she waits for the inevitable beating. The next time we see Sally is when she is at the library, and she gets a phone call from her husband. He tells her that there's been an incident at the Hart family's house, and he's heading over there. The place has been set ablaze. Alice is taken to hospital, her mother is taken in with her, and her father dies. Alice has been badly beaten. She's got choke marks around her neck, and she is not in a good way. She's put on support machines, but her mother ends up getting the worst of it. Obviously, her father died, but he was a dick, so kind of deserved it. Her mother, however, has been badly burnt and, of course, has this baby inside her. They rush her into surgery, but she dies during the surgery, and then the baby is whisked off to Sydney, I believe, where it is going to be taken care of. But it's in a very fragile state. It's around about 24 weeks. It's at a very low weight, and the rate of it surviving is bare to nothing. So the only survivor is potentially Alice. Her grandmother turns up, played by Sigourney Weaver, and it seems that she doesn't know what to do, but it also seems that she is incredibly cold. Sally wants to take Alice on because she thinks she's a good kid, and also it would seem that Sally has also lost her daughter recently, so having Alice there would be kind of a replacement. Seems like her daughter was a very similar age to Alice. But eventually, after speaking to her wife, Alice's grandmother decides that she's going to take Alice on. She wants to look after her granddaughter and make sure that she's okay. However, we start to meet some people that live in and around Alice's grandmother's compound. I think it's a compound anyway. It seems to be a gated community of some sort. And they have similar scars on their hands to the one that Clem did. So we're unsure what these scars mean right now, but they seem to be significant. And since Alice is going to be living with Clem's mother, we need more understanding of what this all means right now. But it seems that Alice is safe, and she's now going to be taken care of by her grandmother. But there's got to be more than meets the eye in this particular case. Episode 2, Wattle. And so we begin to realise more about this compound, this community that Alice's grandmother's got set up. Now, Alice's grandmother is named June, so I'll continue to try and use June throughout. But essentially, this commune that June has set up is for battered women. Women who have fled their partners, women who have had their partners sent to jail because they've been abused in God only knows what kind of ways. Generally by fucking cowards. And I'll say that because my dad was one. But these women have started to rebuild their lives. But obviously they are behind a gate. They're in this gated community and they are trying to do the best that they can. But since nobody knows who they are or where they are, it's difficult for them to live a life outside of these walls. And so any rumours that go round just sound like these women are living in a cult. We meet some of the other group members. Twig, who is June's wife, and a girl named Candy Blue. Candy is the adopted daughter of June and Twig, and she was found very much in the similar way to the story of Moses. It sounds like she was found by a river in a basket. But she came to live on the farm with June, Twig, and of course Clem. Clem was essentially her older brother. And these two characters share the same scar on their hand, and it is noticed by Alice. Alice just continues to get used to living on this farm, and since the accident, her father crushed her larynx, so she's not been able to speak. She doesn't even muster any sound whatsoever. But while she is getting used to being on the compound, she just goes exploring, as, again, a young girl will. However, one day when she walks into a shed, she gets scolded by her grandmother June, because she shouldn't be in there. It's a very dilapidated scene, and it looks like it's about to fall down at any moment. So June seems to just want to keep her safe. After everything that she's been through, June wants her granddaughter to be cared for, and see that she is cared for as well. Alice is then sent to hang out with Candy, who is making pies, but she doesn't really want to be there. She asks if Candy will take her down to the river, but Candy just says, look, I'll instruct you where to go, but I'm not coming with you. She sends Alice out, and Alice ends up having an accident. We go back to a point in her life where Alice ended up out on a boat with her father, and when she couldn't perform a certain dance for her dad, I believe it was a hula that he was trying to get a video of or get photos of, he was abusive towards her. She tried to pass him in the boat, and he pushed her off, sailing off, leaving his daughter stranded in water, knowing she couldn't swim. And it was only, as we find out at the end, due to the fact that her mother Agnes could, she dived in and managed to save Alice. But she wasn't on the boat when the incident happened. She was watching from the shore. But while she's down by the river, she has a flashback of this when she actually walks into the river and her feet go from under her. She, however, is saved by a boy named Oggy, who knows of June and knows of this particular place because he grew up there. He doesn't live there anymore. He and his mum now live in town, but he still comes back there quite often. And it seems that Alice has now made a friend. However, when she gets back to the house, her grandmother is obviously worried about her, and at this point is scolding Candy as to where the hell she is. Alice ends up with another flashback of her father striding across a room towards her, just the way that her grandmother is. She hides and she tries to cower away, and she ends up having a panic attack. Due to the trauma that she's had throughout her life, she just cannot handle it. And so they ring the hospital and just try and find out if there's anything that they can do, because Alice has been in such a state after what she's been through. Candy, however, is doing deliveries. Now, this compound actually is a bit like a florist. They grow their own flowers, they arrange them, and people buy these arrangements. They also cook pies and take them into town. So Candy is the delivery girl because she has never been abused. She's always lived with June and Twig. So she is the perfect delivery girl because nobody really knows who she is. She heads into town, she drops off these pies, and while she does, she meets a man in town. He seems quite charming, but after a while she heads back to the compound. Once she gets there, however, we see that the man has actually followed her. And it turns out that this man is the former husband of one of the women that lives there. So even though it's a safe haven, it's not always the safest. June, however, will continue to look after her women and make sure anything bad that's going to happen is going to happen to her way before it happens to any of the others. However, Alice is curious about this place because of all the women that are actually there. It seems that there's only really been 2 men there, or at least 2 boys. One being the son of June, i.e. her dad, Clem, and the other is Oggy. So she asks if her mother was ever a part of this group, to which we find out that June lies to Alice. She tells her that she never was. However, further on in the episode, Alice finds the book Alice in Wonderland. Inside is a note from her father to her mother about why he's so happy that she is at Thornwood and how elated he is that his mother loves her so much, that she's almost like the daughter she always wanted. Alice now has to get back to a normal life, and she ends up being taken to school by June. However, once she gets there, it seems like she's never actually been to school before. So she's scared, she's nervous, and thankfully she sees Oggy, who is in her class. And so we see that they have lunch together, and he is happy to try and support her and look after her. When they get confronted by other children, Oggy stands up for her. However, Oggy gets punched in the face because, well, he's a sweet kid, but he's pretty useless. However, Alice is not, and the kid that actually punches Oggy gets the beating of his life from Alice. She's full of rage, just like her father, and we see how much rage she's got in her throughout these episodes. Because at the end, when she finds out that June is actually covering up the fact that her mother was there, she gets very, very angry and starts to envision what she envisioned for her father, which was burning the house down. So Alice has a lot of issues that she needs to maybe work through. However, we'll go back to Sally, because Sally has become a little bit obsessed with Alice. She starts trying to gather information on June so that she can actually take Alice from her. It turns out that Agnes, in her will, has actually given custody to either June or to Sally. But since June is her biological grandmother, June takes precedent. And so now Sally is adamant that she is going to get Alice back. She's hell-bent on it. And so any little stories that come her way about June, for instance, she asks her husband, the police officer, to actually investigate her and see if there's anything on the system. However, when he finds out there's been spates of abuse against her, he doesn't tell his wife. Another officer sees this and he tells her. And then a nurse at the hospital tells her about the fact that Alice has had another panic attack. So she's gathering all this information to try and make a case against June so that she can get Alice back. But the problem there is some of the information that she's getting is wrong, because all the assault charges that are actually against her on the computer system are actually because she has reported these abusers. We see that she is the one putting herself in harm's way when she goes and confronts the man who stalked Candy. She goes and finds him at a bar and essentially goads him into beating the shit out of her so she can have him arrested, knowing that he isn't going to be able to get to his wife because he's going to be back in jail because he's only on parole right now. So she definitely looks after her women, but also she's hiding a lot of secret. She won't tell Alice the full story of what has happened at this compound. However, we find out why Sally is so obsessed with Alice. Not only does Alice remind her of her daughter, but it would seem that at some point Sally and Clem actually slept together. Now, whether it was consensual is a different matter, but we know what Clem is like. So potentially it wasn't, but she ended up carrying his baby to term, and then their daughter Gemma, her and John's daughter Gemma, or at least John believed it was his daughter, ended up dying years later. So she sees a lot of Gemma in Alice because obviously Alice comes from Clem, and so did Gemma. So it's an absolute fucking mess. But we're slowly unraveling the mystery. Episode 3, Lantern Bush. Now, after finding evidence that her mother was at this farm, even though her grandmother had said that she wasn't, Alice is pissed at June because, well, even though she can't express it, she knows for a fact that June lied. And so when they're getting her ready for school, Alice has basically gone to hide. June and Twig are searching all over, and of course they're shouting, but it's not like Alice can shout back. Eventually when June and Twig find her, Alice is still holding the book, Alice in Wonderland, with the inscription from her father to her mother. She runs over to her and she starts hitting her with it. Eventually they get her under control and they eventually start telling her a little bit about her mother being on the farm. They tell her about the room that she stayed in and the fact that it's the same room that Alice is now staying in. But they also tell her that they need her to start speaking and that the only way that they will actually allow her to have more information is when she starts speaking again. But we know that June is hiding something, and potentially about her son. A new mother and her son actually appear on the farm. This woman is trying to get used to being away from her husband and obviously having a child with her. It's a whole new vibe for Alice. She's never seen someone younger than her at this farm. And of course, the women are there to help. She sees this as an opportunity because, well, she was just about to be a big sister. And as much as she can, she starts helping out around the farm, and she seems to be settling into this new life that she's got. She knows that she's going to get answers to her questions once she's got her voice back, and she also knows that this is a good place to stay. She knows she's going to be safe here. That is proven when Sally comes to visit, but I'll come to that. Alice starts becoming attached to this young boy Joshy and is devastated when the mother ends up taking him back to his father, and we know the outcome. Generally, when these women go back to their domestic partner who has abused them previously, once again they'll probably end up getting abused. So it's an unfortunate fact of life. Not always, but it usually is. And so as soon as she finds out, Alice runs off and heads to the river where she first met Oggy. Knowing that she is alone, she tries to scream out. It's something that she's been trying to do the whole episode, and just to try and find her voice again, to try and get it back, to get it working again. But this time she manages it. Whatever it was that was physical about her or in her psyche breaks, and her voice comes out. The first one to hear it is Oggy. He comes by and she manages to talk to him. She then goes back, and because it's her birthday, she has a celebration for it. She also speaks to the women at the farm, and everyone is just stunned. It's the first time they've actually heard her talk. June, however, ends up getting some news. When we actually thought that Alice's brother had died because of the fire that she'd set, or had been set in her home, even though he had been whisked off to Sydney, it turns out that he survived. He's been having surgery, but everything is okay. And June is told that it is time for him to go home. June seems very unsure of what to do in this situation, because even though they've just had a baby there, generally males aren't allowed in the farm. There have been obvious exceptions, her son for instance, but even when she talks to Alice later on, obviously Alice has now got her voice back so she can talk to her about her father. She says that there was always something wrong about him. There was always something different. And we end up seeing how he and Candy ended up getting the same scar on their hand. It was actually a tryst between the two of them. They seemed to be thick as thieves back in the day, and this was probably before Alice's mother turned up. And so during that time, they seemed to be either just best friends or something more. But they ended up making a little blood pact between them, and that's why they have the scars on their hands. But after talking to Alice, and Alice leaves the room, June speaks to Twig, because Twig is looking at her as if to say, you haven't told her the full story. She says, look, I'm going to get to it, but we're not going to rush this thing. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. For now, she just needs to know what she needs to know. It doesn't have to be everything. So of course it would seem that June is keeping a hell of a lot more from Alice than she's letting on. And so we'll go back to Sally. Sally and John obviously have just had this big discussion about the fact that Sally was pregnant before she met John, and she was pregnant with Clem's kid, Clem Hart, Alice's dad. Eventually, when their daughter Gemma had medical issues and they needed to find some donor, neither of them were a match for their daughter. However, one of the doctors asked whether there might be someone else who can help, knowing the test results and knowing the fact that John wasn't the father. And so Sally reached out. However, Clem didn't want to hear anything about it. Eventually, Agnes started asking Clem about it because he'd overheard, and that's when he started to get violent. But this is why she has become so obsessed with Alice. She saw Alice on the day that she went over to talk to Clem, and obviously since losing her daughter, she knows that Alice is technically her relative. After all, she gave birth to her half-sister, so she knows that that is why Agnes had actually added her into the will. John obviously tells her, look, I don't care, that has nothing to do with me, any of it. But he thinks that his wife's going a little bit stir crazy, trying to pursue this line that she is. And like I said, it was proven. She turns up at the farm and asks to actually speak to Alice. After some back and forth between her and June, June ends up taking her to the school, and when she sees Alice for the first time, Alice seems to just be sad by what she sees. Whether it's the memory of that day, or the memory of her walking into that library and someone being kind to her, or whatever it was, she didn't react well, and she walks past her and walks over to her grandmother, and Sally is left bereft by this. She goes home, she apologises to John, and he says it's not too late for us. There is time. But for now, who knows what's going to happen with them. But at least she's not going to be pursuing Alice anymore. Okay, so this is a really incredible series and really well acted. Like, the girl playing Alice is phenomenal. You feel every type of emotion with her. And for the first 2-3 episodes, she's been near enough silent. And so it's just such a hard subject to watch. But thankfully, they don't show you too much. It's very much an audio interpretation of abuse rather than showing you physically what's going on. And I'm thankful for that, because it's hard to watch this kind of show. Even though I know it goes on, and as I said when I was talking about it, the man is fucking weak. He doesn't deserve to have a loving wife the way that he does, and he certainly doesn't deserve the daughter that he's got. He is a weak, pathetic man. He really should have just gone and spoke to someone, but instead he takes it out on his children and his wife, or his child and his wife. Obviously there was another one on the way, and he isn't great with the first one. I mean, he pushed her in a fucking river while he was on a boat and then drove off, or sailed off. He is an abhorrent piece of shit. And I'm just so glad that he got the comeuppance he deserved. Now, nobody deserves to die, but fucking hell. He is, just when you think that it is a idyllic scene when you first see the family, and even though there are times when he seems like a really good dad, it's that switch within him that is horrendous to see. And now you have to watch Alice as she is coming to terms with what happened to her, and also what happened to the family. Essentially, if it's as she said that she caused this, which unintentionally she kind of did, but we don't know the full facts of this yet. But she is now living with the fact that she killed her dad. She has technically killed her mother, even though her mother went into surgery and then didn't come out. But she was only in surgery due to her daughter. And she thinks that she's killed her brother because her brother has gone off to Sydney and nobody knows anything about him apart from June. So right now, she doesn't really have any family. Okay, she's got June, but she's never known her before. And yes, she's got this commune now, this group of women that have come from these abusive backgrounds, so they know exactly what this girl has been through. They've probably been through it tenfold. And so she's going to have to learn and grow with these people. Now, I know that she does because I know the actress who's going to be playing Alice in later episodes, or I would assume in later episodes, because she was the reason that I wanted to watch the show. But I think for now, the job that has been done, this young lass who is playing her, is amazing. But yeah, Ayla Brown has just done such a great job portraying Alice so far that I'll be astounded when she is taken over by who's coming probably, if not next episode, probably 5, 6 and 7. But I think Sigourney Weaver has pulled a blinder in this as well. She's always going to be one of those people that I obviously grew up with. She was in Aliens, and then she was in the Ghostbusters franchise as well, among many other things. And she always manages to pull off a good performance. And what is also impressive about this is the story was so good that they managed to get someone like Sigourney Weaver to come and do it. Like, this is an Australian show, and yes, it's on Amazon, but it's an Australian show. It's very rare you get that kind of crossover. It's a bit like I was saying about Kunal Nair when he was in Criminal UK. It's strange to see someone with the background that they've got, like he was in The Big Bang Theory, and, you know, Sigourney Weaver is Sigourney fucking Weaver. It's weird seeing them out of those contexts, but knowing how great they're going to be in the performance that they pull off, essentially. So, this has been great so far. I've really enjoyed watching the show as much as you can do when it's about abuse. I think it's a great story to tell, and it's harrowing, like I said it was going to be, but it's also an important show to watch. It's an important message to have out there, and obviously if you are suffering from any type of abuse, go and speak to someone, because nobody should be suffering in this world, and especially not a child like this. Anyway, this is why I put the podcast together the way that I do. However, next week we're going to be going to a subject just as dark, so we're not going to have a reprieve for a while. So I'm just going to try and muddle my way through it as best as I possibly can, but I hope you come along for the ride. Anyway, I'm done for today. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening to me ramble on, and I hope you're all doing well out there. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.